Your just still image before you actually got on is
Yeah,
the best thing.
I know.
Dude, your
That's
mustache. I will. When I first saw it on Saturday, I was like, "This is." Dude, that thing has a life. Does it have a brain and a heart and a spine and the whole thing? Because it looks like its own being.
people love it, man. I did this, I think, back in February, right before COVID happened. Just as something kind of fun. I had a beard for like 5 years, and I was like, I think I'm gonna just go with the mustache, and people just like fell in love with it. And I didn't think like it. I just think of it as like me having a mustache. It was fun, and then people just like gravitated towards it. Now I got to ask. People ask me, "Oh, let's do a mustache cigar," and I'm like, I don't know about that. Let's not get carried away with this thing.
Yeah, hold the phone a little bit. I will say, did you shapen up the mullet a little bit? I know you said that you were going to get it reworked, but
not yet. I just put in a little bit more gel today, so it doesn't like fall in front of my face. But it's it's getting there.
Dude,
the gel help.
You look like you're getting ready to go bowling at like a local tournament.
Exactly. That's what I'm going for. That's what
such a good look, Chris. So when I met him at the lounge last week, you straight did look like a cocaine cowboy. Like he looked like Pablo Escobar. I'm like, that's the coolest look I've ever seen. Like, honestly, there may be a resurgence of that look anyway. Like the whole 1980s, early 90s, Colombian cocaine look. Like you could very well be starting a new trend as we speak.
I hope so. I hope I'm getting ahead of it. I just hope people think I'm cool,
Oh, I love it, dude. It's so well. The cool thing is like when you walked in, you stand out. Like, you were with Jared, and who was the other guy? Who's your
Ryan? He's our rep in that area.
Ryan. So you walk in with those guys, and they're very like nondescript. Like it's just two guys walking. But then when you walked in, it looked like you should have security running behind you. It's fantastic. It's such a cool look. I was so impressed. I was like, that's awesome. Even my father-in-law, he's like, dude, he's got a killer mustache. That thing is crazy. I was like, it's pretty rad. It's very fun.
That's too funny, man.
How was the rest of the trip? How did it shape up? How was that Super Bowl party in Pittsburgh?
Oh, it was great.
That's awesome.
So it's funny because Jared is a big Bengals fan,
right?
So, and you're in Steelers country, and I think even though actually there was quite a few people rooting for the Bengals, but I thought I wanted Matt Stafford to win. I told him, I'm rooting for the Rams. Like I want Stafford to get his. Joe Burrow will get his eventually, and then. Towards the end, that last drive, you could just see how down he was. Like you could see he was in the dumps, and the owner of the shop's like, could see that. He's like, let's get a slow clap going for the Bengals to try and just get his spirits up a little bit. So the whole shop is clapping for the Bengals. And then like 30 seconds later, the game is over. I had to go like console him and make sure that he's doing okay. Because, man, I mean, if the Dolphins ever made it to the Super Bowl and they lost, I would be devastated.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like Cincinnati, like the vibe around here in the past couple weeks has just been something like I've never seen before. A unique experience to see a bunch of pop-up, selling, people on the side of the road selling Bengals t-shirt. Like every mile, there's like another pop-up tent selling Bengals apparel and all that. So it's like you've never seen that before. Like Bengals never even sell at the stadium. Typically, people get season tickets and they go to like 3 games. Just like, oh, God, we got to watch this again. And then this year, there's just like this new energy around the team, which I think will continue on with Joe Burrow for sure. But I agree with you. Like it was weird because when I was watching the game, I didn't have a definitive, here's who I wanted to win. So during the game, it was like a real mind fuck because my wife's looking at me because I'm cheering for big plays. Like every time Cooper Kupp made a big play, and even like, I'm a Browns fan. So when Odell Beckham, I heard he tore his ACL, I think the verdict's still out, but it's like a guy who was on our team that didn't do shit. I was even rooting for him when he made those 2 massive plays. So it was like, it was a big play game for me, and I'm cheering for both sides, which is a really weird thing to do. Like 1 second, the offense makes a great play, and then the next second, the defense makes a big play, and I'm cheering for both. But I agree with you in the sense that like Matt Stafford, it was cool to see a guy who's been in the league for 13 years, has literally been with one of the shittiest teams in existence, actually win a Super Bowl. Like, it's incredible to watch that. So it's like, I agree. Joe Burrow's going to get his. He's such a good quarterback and he's so young. It's like, dude, you've got plenty of time. You'll get there.
Yeah. And we're going to see the same three teams from the AFC. They're going to be battling it out year after year. Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow, they're going to be seeing each other every single year.
Yep.
And it's just going to be who can top the other one that year. So Burrow will be back. Yeah,
I totally agree. It was a hell of a game. Like, I know I don't think it was as high scoring as people suspected it would be, but I think part of that is like Odell Beckham going out as early as he did. It kept Cooper Kupp contained until the fourth quarter. So it was like, it ended up not being this gunslinging matchup that I think we suspected it would, because you're down arguably one of the best receivers in the NFL. So the pressure's kind of off at that point. But then Cooper Kupp's like, oh, okay, hold my beer. Here we go. And then just dominated.
Yeah, I'm still the best receiver in the league. So you're not going to do anything about it.
It was crazy. I think it's nuts, the fact that like in the last quarter, you could have decided to give the MVP either to Cooper Kupp or Aaron Donald. Either one of those guys I think equally could have received it. I honestly think someone just flipped a coin and was like, okay, heads is Cooper, tails is Aaron Donald.
What I recently heard, and I don't know if it's true, but I think it is that all the MVP votes need to be in before the 2-minute warning.
Oh, fuck.
What happened? I don't know how true that is, but on the podcast I listened to, that's what they said. And it sounds accurate. Like, that could definitely be the case. So Aaron Donald doesn't really have a shot to get it because he doesn't make that play. Right. And then it's really Cooper Kupp. And I thought they were going to give it to Stafford, like, just as like, your first season with the new team, you win the Super Bowl. Like, maybe he still threw 2 interceptions, but like, here you go. Like, you deserve this type of thing. But I was wrong.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. And then I like looking at it, his stats, like those 2 little blemishes, we'll call those 2 little blemishes, obviously those interceptions. Other than that, that no look pass to Cooper Kupp was one of the craziest passes I've ever seen.
Amazing.
Wasn't even looking at him and just threw it with the most insane accuracy I think I've ever seen. And it was just a perfect throw. I was like, that alone, like that one play is almost as right. But those 2 interceptions, man, that hurt him. If he didn't throw any interception, no picks, he would have definitely been MVP, hands down.
Absolutely.
It was such a crazy freaking game. It's cool that you got to see it in Pittsburgh. And I'm glad to actually hear that Pittsburgh fans were okay with rooting for a division team, because that's kind of how I was as a Browns fan. It's like, I hate Bengals fans, and I live in Cincinnati. They're the worst. They're the dregs of society, the most garbage human beings you could ever meet. And that irritates the living shit out of me. And I wouldn't say that about Jared, but for all the other people, it just irritates me so much that Bengals fans, like everyone that I've met is just absolutely shitty. And maybe that's just my experience. So that's like what I'm drawing upon, but I'm still happy for the team and I'm happy for the city. So I had to root. I was like, I've got to be excited for the Bengals. Like, I'm not going to be like, fuck them, they didn't deserve it. It's like, no, dude, that's like, it's been 30 years. Like, come on.
As we both know, as shitty sports organizations, like when you see another shitty sports organization make it, you're kind of happy for them.
For sure. Yep. That is definitely kind of how I feel about it, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's get into this. I've got so many freaking questions, and I was piecing together because I think I remember you telling me you're 26, right?
Correct.
So how old's your brother?
Alec is 29.
Okay. He's 29. You're 26. The business has been in place for 25 years.
Yes. Just after I was born, he started.
So the business is your brother's name and your name.
Correct.
Intentionally. So at the point of the inception of this business happened around the time you were being born. So where did the brainchild from your dad, where did that come from? Why the decision on the name? And why get into the cigar industry at all? What did your dad do previous to that?
So previous to cigars, my father worked for my grandfather. They had a business that was like nuts and bolts and screws and hurricane fasteners for, Florida people. And so my grandfather had an accident where he fell off of like a ladder and basically hit his head, and he was kind of like slow ever since. So my father had to take over his business.
Gotcha.
Later on, he sells the business. He's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And it really was as simple as the people that worked there and his friends saying like, oh, well, you really enjoy cigars. You smoke a cigar on the way to work almost every day. Maybe you should look into getting into cigars. So then not much later, he started the company. And the reason for Alec Bradley was a couple things. So I think back then, my grandfather and his business partner, it wasn't the name of the business, but maybe it had something to do with like the distribution or something with like a truck. And it said Gloria Allen on it. So Gloria was the child of one of his business partner, and Allen being my father. So it was named after two kids. And then also part of the story is that it had to be Alec Bradley because my grandfather said you want to start with the letter A because it's going to be at the front of the yellow pages. So very, very quickly became irrelevant. But that was maybe what, I mean, I think Alec Bradley still sounds better than Bradley Alec, but part of the reason his name came before mine.
Yeah, no, it's that. Well, it makes sense because I remember a time of which, it's like we all remember getting the yellow pages showing up at your doorstep, and it's just thick, giant book, the white pages, yellow pages, the whole thing, whatever. And I remember other businesses saying the same thing, that you want to name your business something A because it's always going to be at the front. Obviously, the yellow pages going. For anybody who's like, dude, if you're like 25 years old and younger, you don't know what the yellow pages are. Like, I think you're right around the time of which like yellow pages were disappearing.
Thanks for saying like the age right under mine that I made the cut. Like,
yeah, you made the cut.
That someone born year after me has no clue what
they have no idea. They're like, what are you talking about? Because it's all internet searchable at that point, right? Like yellow pages, white pages, like they're like, wait, what is that thing? I remember I worked down the road from one of the big yellow page companies. It was like God, what was the name? It wasn't the Yellow Pages. I forget the name of the company, but they did like Yellow Pages around local area. And I remember them just like going out of business, like in the blink of an eye. It was like, bam, gone. Like it was like 1 year, as soon as the internet was like, oh, we can create these directories and do things to allow accessibility to people's phone numbers and that. It was like they were just gone. Like they just disappeared. And they were a big company in a big building. And they just like one day they were just no longer here. They're just bye-bye. Yeah. It's weird, that transitionary period was like, I feel like it happened so fast. There was no like gradual ramp up. It's almost like Blockbuster being gone. It's like Blockbuster was like, when it was gone, it was gone. It was like, bye, just vanished. Dude, I remember they tried to do some creative stuff. It just didn't work.
I'm hoping this dog doesn't bark. That's why I've been on mute. Dude, do you remember when we used to like go to phone booths and then look at yellow pages and then prank call people from phone booths? Spending like 25 cents to 50 cents to like prank call people.
Oh, dude,
that was like the late 90s for us.
Yeah, I remember.
That's a little before my time.
Dude, before my time. I remember carrying around just like a pocket full of quarters because if you're out and you needed to tell your parents you're going to be home late, you just got to go walk to a payphone or ride your bike to a payphone and make sure that you pop in a quarter to call your parents. Like that was, or I remember calling my dad collect one time and he's like, what the fuck are you doing?
I remember also we go to like back to your Blockbuster point. There'd be like free 30-day trials to AOL online, and we would snag like 50 of those suckers.
Oh, those free discs.
And then at night in our neighborhood, we would use them as frisbees for a personal tag game. So if you got hit with a CD, you were out. So we were just chucking these things like shurikens at each other in the middle of the neighborhood.
Tossing like Ninja Star discs at each other. Like free AOL discs that you just grab a handful of from Blockbuster. So funny, man. Those are weird days. Do you remember? I'm gonna see. This is gonna be it's such a dumb question, Bradley. But like, do you remember dial-up internet?
I do remember dial-up internet,
okay.
And I think my grandparents still have dial-up.
They're like the one person keeping dial-up service alive in their area.
Correct. Yeah, it's those old Miami people that are still using dial-up internet for sure.
Oh, I love that. Hey, so how's Florida right now? Is it nice?
Oh, it's beautiful.
God, it's nice here. I gotta say, it is nice here though, so I can't complain.
What do you consider? What's considered nice there?
Well, it's really windy and cloudy and 61 degrees.
Okay, six. Because when I was there, it was maybe I don't know about when I was specifically at like B&G in your part of town, but for most of the time on my trip, it was like high of 40s most places, and I was like, oh, I'm screwed. Like, so everyone was like calling me a baby and a Florida boy, and I'm like, yeah, I am all those things. Like, I'll 100% admit it. Like, I want to go home. Like, I want to be back where I was born.
No, you know what's weird though is like I think conditionally over just such a long period of time of being here that I get used to the cold, but it doesn't mean I like it. You know what I mean? Like I can go like when it's 40 degrees and sunny, I'm usually out in shorts, and it's just because I run hot anyway. I'm like a fur ball from the waist down. It's just everything is insulated. So I don't mind the cold. I prefer the warm though. Like it's like anybody who's like, oh, you're a pussy and it's just cold and blah blah. I thrive in the cold. It's like no one thrives in the cold. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. We all want to be somewhere warmer. We're just too chicken shit to move.
Exactly.
That's what it comes down to. I've been threatening to move Ohio, like away from here for what, Chris? 15 years. And guess where I'm at? I'm still here. I've moved
most of your adult life, yeah.
Yeah, most of my adult life, I'm like, I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to make something of myself. And then here we are. Like, I'm still here for 34 fucking years. It's never going to change.
There was like 2 times on the trip where I was getting a notification from the Weather Channel app, and it's like significantly colder in Florida tomorrow, high of 67 degrees. And I was like, oh man, like, why am I not there right now? Oh.
I know. I get jealous, especially like Florida in the wintertime. Florida in the summer it's hot. Like there's like the humidity too. It just sometimes it is unbearable. But if you're close to the beach, you've got at least accessibility of like good winds coming from the beach. You've got the water, and that's always great. And you know what the thing is like gets too hot, you just go in the air conditioning. It's not a big deal. That's why we have it.
The center of the state though during the summer.
Oh
months,
yeah, the mosquitoes. Ugh. Do you ever see alligators down there? Is that like because you're not that far from the Everglades though in Fort Lauderdale, right?
Yeah, it's like 30 minutes, but you don't just like see alligators necessarily out and about. Like you really like it's really not like that. Some places, sure, like that in the Everglades areas, but like I remember when I was a kid, there was like these lakes that would run through back of people's houses, which were connected to the Everglades, kind of. So like every once in a while, there is an alligator in the backyard, but that happens very, very rarely.
Yeah, that's interesting. That would be terrifying to me. It just randomly saw a gator just pop up, and it's just like, boom, it's right there, just ready to eat a small child in the backyard. That's crazy.
After you see it once or twice, you're like, yeah, it's just it'll go away.
You're just like, I'll kick this gator. Fuck this gator.
I feel like the waters are so scary though, unless it's a pool, because you've got alligators, giant pythons, these freaking Eastern Asian snakeheads now roaming the waters.
Oh,
like
yeah.
You're basically a target for a bunch of man-eating animals.
Yeah, I used to so Bradley, I used to fish in Boca. Like Deerfield Beach, a place called Lake Ida, which is like those kind of canal channels that run through neighborhoods and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I used to fish those all the time for peacock bass. I go down there with a guide, and I remember just seeing like the most ridiculous amount of iguanas I've ever seen in my entire life. Lining everywhere we went, they're huge, and they're just lining the whole canal system. I'm like, thousands of iguanas. I'm like, what is going on in this? We're in Jurassic Park. This isn't Florida. This is the craziest shit I've ever seen. I peed on one actually by accident.
And what's funny about the iguanas is when it does get cold-ish, but like what's considered cold for Florida is the iguanas are, because they're cold-blooded, they fall out of the trees because they freeze. It's too cold, and they freeze and they fall out of trees.
Holy shit.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Dude, talk about a serious disadvantage.
Yeah.
That is terrible.
Yeah,
oh man. Cool. Sorry, I got off on a weird tangent there. Anyway, so back to the business. Your father starts at 25 years ago, names it after you and your brother. So how does he start? Like, how does it begin? What's the thought process? What's the idea? How do you get into a marketplace? Because this would have been the late 90s, right? How do you get into this marketplace and actually perform and make something in the marketplace? Because I always feel like that's the tough thing, right? It's like to build the brand and make it meaningful.
Yeah. So it was actually post, what people consider cigar boom. He missed out on that big, buying, smoking frenzy that everyone went through, which a lot of the companies that when they started in the 90s, they were part of the boom and they either, stuck around or they didn't make it. So he started after all that. So he didn't get a chance to use that to grow. So he started trying to get cigars into golf clubs and country clubs and stuff like that. So the first brand he made was called Bogey Stogies. The best bogey you'll have on the golf course was the tagline for it. And that did not go too well. And I think he was a big tagline guy. So then after that, I think it was called Gourmet. He did a little stunt with flavored cigars, which went, I think, even worse than that. So it was called Gourmet Delights. All of the flavor and none of the fat. That was like a huge train wreck. And I think that's when he didn't know if he was going to kind of keep going with cigars. But his first big hit, which kept him afloat, which we still make today, is called Occidental Reserve. So that is a bundle product that's made at Davidoff. And I think he told this story, so I think I'm okay to tell it. But he used to go around telling people that these are Davidoff seconds. And as you know, Davidoff does not make seconds.
No.
But that wasn't the case that they were seconds, but that was a way for him to get his foot in the door places, saying that these are really cheap Davidoffs. And then I think not too much later, and it worked for a while, but then Henke Kellner kind of caught wind that he was, saying this to accounts and stuff like that. And basically said you better knock it off or this is over. Yeah. So he knocked it off, but he had acquired enough accounts that the cigar was great. Like I said, still around. And that was a huge seller for him. Then later on came Max, which we still make today.
Right.
Max, he sold every size at $5 at retail.
Damn.
So didn't matter if it was Robusto. I think he also had almost an A size or close to an A size. So that was also $5.
So in its largest Vitola, did people automatically assume they were just getting a better value because there was more product? Did you end up in that particular line, did you sell larger Vitolas more than you would a traditional Robusto?
I honestly have no clue. I don't know what I know that A size that we had we don't make it anymore, but I'm assuming that it probably was pretty even across the board because you still have your smokers that are Robusto smokers or Toro smokers, but also was a little bit different is that it was a big ring gauge line. So right. A Robusto, I think our Robusto is 56 and, Toro's 58 and so on. So it was one of those first cigars that started to make an impact on the big ring gauge front where most people were still making their traditional sizes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where does he go from the Max? So his foot's in the door with Davidoff seconds, which I fucking love. What a good tactic. Your dad sounds like a hell of a salesman. The taglines and that Davidoff seconds. He's
a hustler. He actually told me a story today that I'd never heard. We have I think it's a mixed fill cigar called Spirit of Cuba. And he was trying to get it to, start selling to his account in Georgia. And the guy's like, I don't have any room for your product. And he's like, just bring in, we have 3 different wrappers, bring in 3 or 5 of each wrapper, bring in 15 boxes. And he's like, I don't have room. And he's like, I'm going to buy and send you a table. You keep it out here at the front counter. And all you have to do is put a handwritten sign saying $40 a box while they last. And so that was at the beginning of my dad's trip on Tuesday. Cigars show up a couple days later. My dad gets home on Friday and the guy calls him. And my dad's worried because he said the guy's kind of a hard ass, but he's a good guy. And he's worried that he's saying that he didn't ship the product or that something was wrong. And the guy said that he's already sold out all the boxes and that he wants more.
Nice.
Damn.
So,
hell yeah.
Oh yeah. He put in his time, he put in his hours and he hustled to make the brand, substantial and what it is.
So at the time of which the Max came out, what year would that have been? Would that have been early 2000s or is that still late 90s?
That's early 2000s.
Okay. So where does it go from there? Because there's this huge period. You're right. It's like outside of the cigar boom, which I think is an aggressive way to start a new cigar business anyway.
Yeah.
And then you're running to a period of the 2000s. And then from 2000 to 2021, obviously a lot has happened. There's accolades. There is, cigar of the year. There's all these other things that are happening. So what's the timeline, like major things that have occurred between that point in time and now?
So another big thing, which we just re-released, is Trilogy.
Right.
A triangle shaped cigar, which no one had done. That, did it do very well for them? At the beginning, it did, because it was a novelty. It was something maybe, a little gimmicky. But it made people, had our eyes on the brand, which, whether the cigar is selling or not, eyes on the brand is always important. You want people to see you and notice you. So that was really big. But the biggest thing, and that was probably in 2002, 2003, probably pretty close to max as well. But the two biggest is one, Black Market. Black Market's our best-selling cigar and has been for about, I think, 10 years. Unique packaging, looks like a crate, something that is just clearly not traditional, and a separate thing in its own, that there's nothing else like it in terms of visual. And then the cigar performed to a very mass audience. But the big thing was Tempest getting rated in Cigar Aficionado in 2007.
Right.
That was, you're talking about a magazine that changed, whatever you want to say about the ratings and stuff like that. That's a separate thing. But what Cigar Aficionado did, and sometimes still does for smaller brands, back then when you made it on the list, you had eyeballs on you. You go,
right.
You had people saying, I've never heard of Alec Bradley before, but they made top 25. And okay, let me try the cigar and let me see what else is in their portfolio. So Tempest hitting in top 25 was really, really big for the success of our company.
And what year was that?
2007.
Okay, so that's still pretty early on, like inception of the business. You're talking about in the 10-year range. So that's still pretty. I mean, you think about it. I always think about the idea that, like, in the cigar industry, you have some brands, like right now, you have brands that are less than a year old that are trying to make a name for themselves, and then you have brands and you have factories that are over 100 years old. There's not many industries that are like that. It's really freaking crazy, the spectrum of time that exists between some brands and some other brands. So like, this is 10 years is still really freaking young, all things considered, in the cigar world. And again, outside the boom. So you get Cigar Aficionado, you get a ranking in the top 25 in 2007. And where does it go from there?
Then it jumps 4 years, and we get number one with Prensado.
Prensado. Yeah. God. I was a Prensado dick rider for a while. Holy smokes, man. I couldn't get enough of that cigar. I actually just pulled it out today, the one that Alex sent me, and I was like, I need to smoke this. And I didn't smoke it today, but I've got it ready. It's at the ready right now.
Yeah. So that was the game changer. That's when everything changed for us. And again, that's still relative to other brands. That's still very young to especially hit, number one. And because of that, and it's not like Prensado at that time, like there was word that like Prensado really wasn't doing that well for us as a company in comparison to other brands. So like, I think everyone was in question on whether or not maybe Prensado was going to stick around. Like, who knew what was going to happen with the brand? And then next thing you know, it hits number one. And then it was, okay, everyone needs this cigar. Everyone has to get the number one. And that's what number ones, especially for a new or younger brand, that was life-changing.
Right.
And so my dad was like, telling the factory, like, basically don't make anything else, make Prensado and make it as fast as you can.
Right.
And so because of that, our quality went to shit. Like, and so, and obviously they're still making some other stuff, but the quality of Prensados and anything being made at the Raíces Cabanas factory was not good. And so for about a year and a half, it was catching up on back orders and getting out as fast as you can. And it was very noticeable that people were basically getting unsmokable Prensados. And so about 2 years after we hit number one, my dad went to Cigar Aficionado and was like, hey, I think you guys I want to tell a story basically. And I think you guys are going to want to, write this article about what happened. And they're like, yeah, I don't think anyone's ever approached us about like doing an article. Usually we approach people about doing articles.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, I know, but this is going to be pretty interesting. So he went to Cigar Aficionado, and the article is called Life After Number One, and how it was, his fault and the company's fault that we produced such bad cigars for that 1.5 to 2 year period. And that, our quality went to shit, and that he basically just wanted to own up to his mistakes and hoping that people, forgive us and don't stop smoking our brand because they had, issues for a little while. So,
right.
It's something that he definitely needed to say to like get off his chest and make him be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, it's an honest and noble thing to do, because I think a lot of people there's something to be said for like the feedback of the consumer. You start to hear things, you hear murmurings of certain things. And if it's centered around quality control issues, especially after such, getting Cigar Aficionado, the number one spot, right? You are automatically have to prepare yourself for something that's just so different in terms of your business. And so I kind of look at it and I think, okay, you can just keep going and pretend that there's not an issue, or you can address it. Your dad decided to address it in a fairly unique way by going back to the publication and saying, hey, I need you to write this article.
Here's what's very powerful about that, which a lot of people sometimes get scared of doing, even when you own up to shit, is you can control the message at that point too. Like you get outside of this whole, like, I don't know, like what is true and what isn't true. And when you're able to own up to it yourself and tell the story, the actual accurate story, you can control the narrative at that point and squash all the weird, you know what I'm saying? Like, because how tales go. Like,
yeah,
it gets
for sure.
Yeah,
Chris, I think you're like super head on with that, and that's something that I think we've tried to adopt here and everything that we do. Like, for example, we moved production of Gatekeeper to Honduras, to Plasencia from Ernesto, mainly because, he hit number one. We couldn't get cigars. We hit number 7, and we obviously both had high demand, but you get number one, I get it. I'm not getting my cigars. So we moved production, and, there's always talks like in the office, well, do we need to tell people? Like, if we tell them, they're going to say it's not the same cigar. They got to smoke it. And I was like, no, let's be transparent. The cigar is still going to be the same. It's all the same tobaccos. Most of the tobacco is coming from Plasencia anyway. So we just have to get 2 different tobaccos to make it in Honduras. So it was a very easy transition, but people are always going to say, oh, well, it's not the same. It's not the same cigar. But instead of just holding that information back and people finding out eventually, let's get ahead of it and let's just tell them and be honest. This is what's happening. We're moving production.
Yep.
Did you find that on the outside of that article that people admired that approach and that it didn't have a negative impact on the business, and perhaps maybe given the honesty probably voted in your favor?
Well, for me, that it was also way before my time. I didn't start working here till 2017, so I didn't really get to see a lot of it. But the bad cigars is always going to have an impression on people, because I know as a cigar smoker, when I have a bad experience, I'm like turned off from a cigar, and sometimes from a company. But I've learned that it's not always the case. But from when I started in 2017, I've had multiple people say something about the article, and that and this was 6 years later or 5 years later, people saying, oh, you're Bradley, like your father did that article in Cigar Aficionado, Life After Number One. I thought that was amazing that he owned up to it. So you're going to hear a lot less people saying stuff about the article, and you're going to have more people talking about the quality control, but that's just the nature of things. You can't really help that.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into it that and you never even really think about it too. Like I trying to reflect back onto like the number ones that were most memorable for me. The first most memorable number one for me was the Prensado, because that was really when I was like heavy into smoking cigars. It wasn't the first time I smoked, but it was like when I was smoking 3-4 cigars a day consistently, was right around that time period. That was the first big one. I think the Andalusian Bull was definitely another really big one for me. And although this one didn't get number one, the EP Carrillo La Historia, when it got number 2, was another massive one for me. Like, so there's some like notable ones in my head. And then it's like weird because when I think about like the Padrones and the other stuff, I'm just like, well, like whatever. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like that's just in my head. There's certain memorable ones that like stick with me. So I could only imagine if other people had the same perception I did of what those number ones were and the impact that they have. Like your guys' ability to just even keep up with like questions, the consumer demand, I couldn't imagine how many shops would be like, I need them on my shelves now. Like, get them in as quickly as possible. And then you having to make all these executable business decisions and try to make every single one right is impossible. That is an impossibility. And I wonder too, like, you know, Ipa Korea's got a number one in the, you know, a couple times in the past few years. It's like, how in the hell do they do it? Like, how do these businesses do it? And I guess for those guys who own factories, it's like you said, they could just stop production on everything else they subcontract and just say, hey, let's put all of our effort into this one thing. Right. Where you guys don't necessarily have the luxury of doing that. But I think the approach and the transparency is super admirable. I think that's awesome. So what has life been like after number one? So the period of Prensado to now, what are some of the milestones that have happened in that time period?
So that's a good question. So, you know, I think it's a little bit tougher. It's a bit of a tougher question. Because those are all, you know, things that have made our business, you know, that things that we're known for. But, you know, other just notable cigars that have just been huge hits for us was the Magic Toast was, I don't know if I told you this, Cory, when we met, but I thought Magic Toast was like a stupid name. I thought Magic Toast, like yeah. When I smoked it, like I was like, man, I don't know about this cigar. Like maybe it's just not for me. And I told my dad, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And he's like, this is going to work. Like, he's like, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. You've been doing this for a year. Like, what do you basically like, what the fuck do you know? like, yeah, like you're right. And that cigar has just been such a huge success. And I think actually in terms of just like straight box sales, that it actually has been doing better this year than like black market for us, if you're talking just at the brick and mortar level.
Yeah.
So that's been massive for us. The Project 40 Natural, when that came out, you know, let me scoot back a bit. So American Classic and American Sungrown, a Connecticut cigar, a dark sun-grown cigar. That was our affordable everyday cigar for people for, I don't know, 6-7 years. And then as prices, you know, our prices went up, that cigar started to get priced out for people where, you know, they wanted to live in that $5 range. So we wanted to find a cigar that could replace that. And we came out with Project 40 Natural. And it went, again, just gangbusters, like couldn't keep it in stock for probably 2 years. Just as it came in, it went out, in and out. So that what I would say is a huge success. And then really gatekeeper. You know, I think when Alec and I came into Alec was in the business 3 years before me, but when we were both working together, and we're, you know, working on, first we did Blind Faith and then came Gatekeeper, and doing it with Ernesto was something that was different for Alec Bradley. Which is the goal of the Alec and Bradley lines, is to always be different from Alec Bradley. People just heavily gravitated towards that cigar. And, you know, we had people saying, oh, like this cigar tastes kind of like an Alec Bradley, but also like an EPC. And you get all these crazy comments or like, oh, it tastes nothing like either cigars. It's just its own thing. But it was so heavily complimented from people that either were Alec Bradley smokers or also weren't Alec Bradley smokers, which was really cool for us to hit a new segment that, that don't usually like our cigars.
Right. Which is awesome. I like I like the idea that you guys were able to do something together and bring it to the marketplace that was identified as different. I think that's cool. It's like uniqueness, because the reality is like you're not your dad. You're a unique person. Your brother's unique person with probably unique tastes and ideas and so on. And the fact that you guys had the autonomy to go and do those things is awesome. Obviously, I anticipate you doing a lot more of those things in the future, obviously. At what point did your brother enter the business? What year was that? Because you entered in 2017, you said 3 years previous, so he would have been 2014.
Yeah, then or maybe a little bit before that. I think he was doing working a little bit while he was still graduating. But once he graduated, I think he went full time in 2014.
So what roles did you guys occupy on the outside of education? Like, did your dad like make like, hey, you're going to come in and like sweep the floors? Or was it like, hey, you guys are going to come in and occupy a marketing capacity, sales capacity, a combination of both? Like, what did that look like?
So the first thing that he wanted us to both do when we started was like learn from everyone in the office and what they do. So like, you worked in shipping for a little bit, you sat with accounting and invoicing for a little bit, a couple of weeks at each one, sales, and then marketing. And then it was, I don't know about Alec when he started, after he did that, what he started to get into. But for me, it was like, we had just fired our marketing company that they were working with. So it was like, oh, we don't have anyone to do social media. Like, Bradley, you're 20 something, like, just do it. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And they're like, you'll figure it out. So it was really rough at the beginning because I had no clue what I was doing. And I still don't exactly know what I'm doing, but I'm definitely getting a little bit better at it. So I kind of got into the social media aspect of things. And then I really found that I liked the packaging part, because I always thought that cigars nowadays always are a little bit boring. Like, I'm not trying to say what we do is boring, but you're talking about an industry with very little change and innovation. But I think cigars can be fun. And I think a lot of the brands that I enjoy in the cigar industry are in that way a little fun. So like, actually the first thing I got to work on, like, I'm smoking, we have our Shamrock that just came out.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like towards the end of the year, and they're like, yeah, we're going to come out with this triple wrap barber pole and next to Filthy Hooligan. They're like, Bradley, you're going to do the box and like work with the graphic designer, and we need it done in like a month. And I was like, I have no clue where to start. So that was like me being thrown into the packaging part and like figuring out the vista and the box. And I basically had all of it done, but I was having issues with like just the color of the box. And like, I don't know what the right thing to do is. So my dad helped me towards the end of it on just like the color and placement of things. But that's when I found out that I like packaging. It's the cool, fun way to get people interested in cigars, which is, I think, what you see a lot of for younger smokers is, what's on the band, what is interesting about this cigar, which is, partly why I pick up certain cigars, because I could tell that people have put a lot of time and effort into creating something.
Yeah, even now, even with a lot of the stuff that we'll see on the shelves that we've all smoked or tried, you still find yourself window shopping with cigars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, labels are definitely very important, even still. Even if you're a reputable brand and people still know you, there's something about it that it's window play, man. You gotta really think through the labeling and the branding.
Yeah. And I think, I've listened to enough where I think I know what brands you guys sort of gravitate towards. Like, if I'm not mistaken, this is off of my really bad memory, that I think Chris gravitates
like
towards
profile.
Yeah, exactly. Like to Tatuaje, and I think Cory more to crowned heads.
That'd be
is that
pretty
accurate?
Yeah, based on spike. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be accurate.
Yeah.
Okay. But like, and those are two brands that I love. But it's interesting because you find that Tatuaje basically usually very standard packaging. The only thing they go crazy on is Monsters.
Monster.
But
Yep.
that's probably my favorite brand outside of Alec Bradley. And then Crowned Heads does a mixture of both. Like you see the La Patissier, if I'm saying that right, you know, just the ribbon on the foot, and it's very simple and sleek. And you're like, it's like it's nothing, but it's something. There's something there that is like very cool about it. And then you see the La Crema, which has a lot of effort put into it. The Serie E, clearly a lot of time and effort put in. So there's something about those two brands that I've always been very fond of, in their own kind of unique way.
It is interesting that, like, from a marketing perspective and just thinking about like the historics of the industry, you can name brands like Fuente, Ashton, My Father. Like there's a very, like, their brand standards don't change. It's just a variation of color, essentially, is what it comes down to. But every single one of them has a unique look, has the same scripted font, has the same kind of design from band to packaging. And it is interesting because as I reflect on like the stuff that you guys have come out with over a period of time, I think about like the Max band. That's not like any other band you've ever seen on any other cigar. It's completely different. Like, but it's weird because when you see it, you know, it's Alec Bradley. So that's kind of the strange thing, is like there's an identity within an identity that people still understand and notice. Where like if it's My Father, it's like you just know what it is when you see it. And even if you did know it was My Father, you look at the band and go, that's a My Father. So it's interesting how you guys have that dynamic of having brand recognition within a brand. It's it's kind of strange.
And honestly, it's really tough. And that's something that we also see that we've noticed as an issue of ours, is that, you know, you see a My Father band, like it could have no words on it, but you know, it's My Father. For us, it's a little bit different because we do have some cigars that do have a brand standard in terms of where Alec Bradley sits, where our logo sits, and where the name of the cigar sits. So like Prensado, Tempest, even Magic Toast, while the packaging is definitely a lot more funky than those brands, it actually follows the same guidelines, but Max doesn't follow those guidelines. Black Market doesn't. And we had noticed in the past that, you know, we would talk to people and say, hey, have you ever smoked an Alec Bradley? And they're like, no, I've never. And we're like, well, have you maybe ever smoked Prensado or Black Market? And they're like, yeah, I've smoked that.
Yeah.
So it's like we have a bit of an issue where people didn't realize they were smoking our cigars. So one of the major things was just increasing Alec Bradley on every box and making sure that our brand is there and that they can see it. But if you put all of our SKUs in a section, it's not necessarily going to look like it's all from the same brand. So that's where, you know, from a business standpoint, there is a lot of confusion and different looks in our brand, but we just want to also create fun, you know, unique brands. And it's hard to do that sometimes when you have the same brand standard for everything.
Yeah, and it does have like a separate consumer appeal too. When you have those sub labels or sub brands where they are maybe disjointed, but they hold their own standard, or they stand on their own. They're almost autonomous, you know. Yeah. It still has a certain brand appeal to a certain consumer that introduces them to the brand of Alec Bradley without even really knowing it.
Yeah, and
like Acids and Drew Estate, which, yeah, you know.
But it's tough. Like, and I'm sure for like Drew Estate, let me rewind before I talk about Drew Estate. Like,
just do it.
There's like something that we would talk about a lot. Is it a house of brands or a branded house? Mm-hmm. So like house of brands, Drew Estate, you have Acid, you have Undercrown, you have Liga. No one's saying Drew Estate Liga, Drew Estate Undercrown, Drew Estate Acid. You just call them by the brand name because they brand as Acid and Liga and Undercrown. Where, you know, if you're talking Fuente, maybe not Opus, but like Fuente 858, Fuente this, Fuente that. So you kind of have to decide, where do you want to be? Do you want to be a house of brands, or do you want to be a branded house?
Yeah, I like that. That's actually really, because there's a moment in time just in the recognition of like someone like Drew Estate, where I said this before, and I said it openly on a podcast, and some people disagreed, but then I think it kind of resonated with others. And I said, and I mean, I meant it with no disrespect, and I don't mean it with any disrespect now at all. Drew Estate is a wonderful marketing firm that happens to make cigars. Like, they do such a good job of marketing, like, and they've built that, and it kind of goes in parallel with what you said. And again, no disrespect, some absolutely phenomenal cigars. There's some that are take it or leave it, but there's something out there for everybody. And then you have someone like Fuente, where it's like, this is a very like historic, and it's family oriented, and it does follow certain brand standards and guidelines, and it does have its own recognition when you hear Fuente. Like, I even think about, if I'm scrolling through, I'll just use an example, Thompson Cigar, Cigar International, JR Cigars. If you scroll through, the designation for each one of the Drew Estate cigars, like you said, doesn't have Drew Estate in front of it. It won't say Drew Estate at all. It'll say Undercrown, it'll say Acid, it'll say Liga. There is no Drew Estate, but all the other brands will be Ashton this, Fuente this, Alec Bradley this, and that's kind of how they're designated. And so they do kind of have a different representation. And then there's other brands like that too, probably not to the same degree as Drew Estate, just given their size. But even reflecting back on how you view things in a humidor and what you look at, one of the things that I always think about is, like, I use Davidoff as this example too. Like, that shit has never changed. Like, dude, they have cigars that if you didn't read closely to the label, you would think was another cigar, or recognition of the color of the wrapper, because they do everything exactly the same, with the same gold and the same white, the same black and all that, right? And they've done that forever. And I think part of that goes to, not that I want to be ageist, is that there's an identification thing with some senior smokers. And when I say senior, I do mean old people. I don't mean smoking for a long time. Literal senior smokers. But then I think in the other sense too, which I love the idea of you guys having a more creative mindset, is that I'm thinking like millennial generation, younger generation, like what our generation, actually, I think I'm technically millennial. Bradley, I'm not sure where you fall technically. Is that
I'm technically a millennial.
Okay. So are you on the line? Yeah, right on the border. Where you want some, like, that kind of appeal, that sense of appeal is more important than perhaps it would be just like making sure it's this regular brand standard that exists. Like, you like exploration and you want to look for something that's unique and different. And visual representation does mean something. Obviously, the smoke has to smoke good, right? Or you're never going to smoke it again. But you want something that is visual appealing. And I think there's a generational thing there. And I also think there's like a socioeconomic thing to it as well. Like, if you're paying, like, Davidoff brand means this, and we consider this thing premium, and it comes at a cost. Where your guys' brand, you have some more expensive cigars, and like you said, you have some more value cigars, and the way that they're represented in the marketplace can be unique and different. And I think that's awesome. Like, that's cool that you've got some of that creative control and you can do some things differently.
Chris, you want to say something? It looks like you're about to jump in.
I just feel like we're missing out on the old. I think we're giving too much shit to the old folks. Like, you name one cigar for old folks that's like ADA compliant or has accessibility to it so they can actually read the font. Name one.
Oh, someone should make that. You guys should do that.
What?
Name one.
Make a band where the font's just fucking ginormous.
Yeah,
it's like contrast.
Any 770 cigar. Just our Texas Lancero. They can read that.
That's a good point. It's a good point.
But what was I gonna say? Oh fuck! I just lost what I was gonna
Sorry.
say.
It was a great thought, though. I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I remember actually going to, like, saying senior smokers or millennial, younger smokers. What's interesting, maybe it's not that interesting, but older smokers are way more brand loyal. Younger smokers are way more likely to try new stuff here and there. They are definitely always more curious about what's new. And that is what's going to, I think, be very tough for a lot of companies in the future, is when
Yep.
there's no more, 858s, heavy 858 smokers or champagne smokers or Ashton classic smokers.
Yeah.
While those brands and cigars are all, legendary and people will smoke them forever. New smokers are going to be looking for new and fun and different. And that's going to be tough because not a lot of brands are and want to make new brands all the time. We want to make sure we have brands that are going to stay around for forever.
Right.
And they will, but I think eventually in the future, there's going to be a drop off for some of these, classic brands that people just aren't as interested in them anymore.
Yeah. It's like that box buyer mentality. It's like, I'm coming in the humidor. It's like, I'm buying my box of whatever today that this person smokes 20 of these a week, and they're just going to keep buying boxes of the same thing over and over. Those people still exist, but I do agree with you. I think there's a sunset, that horizon is coming pretty close now, where that generation is likely going to exit very soon. And by exit, I do mean die off. Sorry. I know it's insensitive, but it's just true. Yeah. And then for us, like Chris and I are the same way. Chris, when's the last time you bought a box of cigars?
Never.
I think I've bought like two boxes, maybe 3 boxes of cigars, legitimately. And the only ones, actually, no, it's probably about 4. So
I've never bought a box.
The Crown Heads Mule Kick 2018, bought 2 boxes of that, and the EP Korea La Historia. The only 2 boxes, and maybe probably a Davidoff in there, Colorado Claros. And it's just because I like to explore. Like, there's just so many things out there. And even if there's something, challenge myself, and I know Chris does the same thing, and I know a lot of cigar smokers do, challenge yourself to try something different, a brand that you've never heard of, or, hey, this different iteration of, I'm not a huge Connecticut fan. So what I've been smoking lately, a ton of Connecticut cigars. I'm trying to actively trying to participate in smoking something I traditionally don't like, just to find out something new sneak out there. Do what?
I'm trying to like it.
Dude, I've tried.
Just you in pain, smoking cigars. Man, this sucks, but still smoking it.
I'm not gonna lie, it's been tough. It's been a tough road. It's been a really tough road. But I believe that if I just put myself off to it and say, no, I'm not going to do this, that I may miss out on something that is unique and is different than I'll end up liking or enjoying or acclimate myself to over time. So, and I think you get that a lot with younger generations, that people, that there's a sense of exploration attached to it, as opposed to, this is my brand and I'm sticking to it. Those days are numbered, really, for all intents and purposes. So what is your guys' thought process as an organization? How do you combat that? Is it part of the marketing aspect of doing some cool, creative, different things, either with packaging or design? I know a lot of folks right now are integrating themselves into the monthly cigar pack stuff, and okay, we can do some unique things here to try to create maybe more small batch or limited edition stuff through certain organizations. Is that something you're looking to explore as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're already doing. Whether it's just having our normal brand portfolio in subscription companies, or doing exclusives for subscription companies, or we do fun. That's the opportunity for us to do fun, different stuff in small batches and make things unique. So you guys, both of us, work with My Cigar Pack. We have I think I'm allowed to say Madcap.
Yep.
Coming out soon with him. Cigar Dojo for Rocky Mountain Cigar Fest last year. We did the Dojo Chico. For Cigar Club, we did Pinkies Out. All just small, fun things where it's kind of, it's not necessarily just about, how do we acquire that market and have people more interested in our brand. That's part of it, but also a creative outlet where we can do these fun, different things, because they're also down to do fun, unique stuff that wouldn't necessarily work on a wide scale. We're not going to put, Madcap in a box and have it as our main, a core portfolio brand. It's just not something that is going to work for us in the long run.
Right.
But it's really fun, cool thing to do for, newer smokers, or just maybe more boutique brand smokers that don't smoke Alec Bradley.
Right.
And it's a clever market test. It's a clever market test to see what the appeal is on some new ideas that doesn't like totally strap you on like production and distribution by like over betting on your next stallion. You know what I'm saying? Like it's kind of like a more safe, fun way to like be risky.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And what's always tough about that is because we never, whenever we put out a cigar, we always think it's great. We never are like, oh, well, let's just use it for this, like this small project. But there's just some cigars that, maybe some of us love and some don't. And that tends to work out for, something that's small batch. But then you have people that love it so much, or they heard, like when I was just traveling, like had people asking about Pinkies Out, like accounts being like, oh, I've heard about the cigar. I heard it's great. Like, is this something that's available to us? And we're like, no, it's only for them. Like maybe if they're, you want to talk to them about coming out with it.
Right.
Sure. But that's only for them. And we don't like to reuse blends and say, okay, like Madcap was really great. Now we're going to go, full blown scale with it. Like that's only for Alec. It's only for my cigar pack. Mm-hmm. And unless he gives us the go ahead, it's just something we don't want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is interesting how like Pinkies Out. And I remember when that release came out, because I have good friends with Dave, rest in peace. He's not actually dead, but he's not with cigarclub.com anymore. So he lives in the area. So I know him pretty well. And I remember that one came out and I was like, oh, what is that? Like I was like super intrigued by it. I'm like, wait, what did you do with Alec? What is this cigar? It was so cool. I thought it was so unique. And he never sent him to me. So I'm really pissed about that. But it's
Alec has some lying around.
I think it is really cool though, that like there are stores and there's other people, consumer base, who are like, well, how do I get my hands on this thing? Like that says something, right? Like there is a hype around it being, even though it's cigarclub.com, they heard about it somewhere. Someone told them about it. It's represented your brand, which is really freaking cool. Do you see, like, what do you see as the future? Like specifically for Alec Bradley, I know we've talked a little bit about just like a high overview of like, hey, this is like industry trends, and you're going to start seeing less of like the historic, hey, everything's going to be box sale Fuente. Like, what is the future for you guys? Like, what does 1 year look like? What does 5 years look like?
Yeah, that's a really tough question because we have a tough time thinking that far in advance.
That's the second time in the 2 weeks where I've gotten the same answer.
Who said that before?
Chris from Luxury Cigar. He was like, "Yeah, we're on like the no plan." I was like, "All right, right on."
Yeah, like we try. We usually fail to plan far in advance, but we just try and focus on what we necessarily think. It's to look at trends is very difficult because we don't necessarily have this data. We're in a very old school, industry, and there isn't just like data lying around being like, everyone's buying, Habano Toros right now. There's just not much available.
Right.
And you never know why some cigars work and why some cigars don't. And everyone has an idea as to why it doesn't, right? It was the packaging, it was the cigar, it was the price point. There's just too many variables, and everyone thinks that they know the right answer, but no one knows the right answer.
Yeah.
But we're just focused on expanding our portfolio, trying to get to, whether it's the cigar itself or price point, trying to kind of close the gap in where we are open. So like for example, in terms of price point, our highest price point is about $20 to $25 for the fine and rare. And then in between that is like nothing. Our Prensado goes for about $12, 12 or 13. So you have this big gap between the Prensado and fine and rare where we just don't have anything. So we're trying to add cigars kind of in that range. And whether it be, Connecticut or just medium shade or dark, we have a large gap where we just don't live in. And there's people that do smoke $15, $16 cigars, all the time. It's not the majority, but there is a group of smokers that do smoke that and are willing to pay that. Do we know that it's not going to maybe, in terms of sales, light the world on fire? we know that because it's a higher price point that most people don't buy in, because it is, that's expensive.
Yeah. Did you find, I do agree with you on the data. I just think about like some of the shops that I've been to, and I'm like looking at their systems and I go, well, there's no way you're sharing data with anybody. It's like, I don't even know if you're keeping track of shit. Like they're just typing shit in the computer. Like, I think it's this thing at $7. And you're like, what? Like you don't even have a barcode scanner. What's happening right now? So like, extracting data to understand analytics in terms of like, okay, what's the feedback just based on the data seems nearly impossible. So with that, like, are you like in terms of the connection with the consumer, is that typically where most of the derived feedback comes from? Is just like you guys being out and about and just listening to consumers like, hey, this is what the demand is, or just feedback on your cigar specifically to kind of let you know, okay, here's maybe where we want to enter in next. Like what kind of mechanisms do you have for that? Or do you just look at the consumer and say, we're going to do what we want to do. Fuck off.
We're going to do what we want to do. 100%. Like that. Like, and people obviously always ask, oh, what are you coming out with? Or like even at B&G, someone was like, hey, what are you coming out with? And I'm like, a new cigar. And they're like, well, what's like the blend? And I'm like, I can't tell you that. And they're like, well, what's the wrapper? I'm like, I'm also not going to tell you that. And like, well, like he tell me the name, and I'm like, no. And they're like, well, what can you tell me? And I'm like, nothing. Like, that's all I can tell you. Like, you have to take what consumers say kind of with a grain of salt, because like everyone's like, oh man, if you made this in a Lancero, like it would kill, or I would buy.
And as soon as you make it into a fucking Lancero, it doesn't sell.
100%. Like it's just like, do we all want people to smoke Lanceros because we all think they're great, or anything less than a 52? 100%. Does it sell? Absolutely not. So whenever we make a cigar in a smaller ring gauge, it's for and we don't produce the same amount. If we make 500 boxes of Robusto Toro Gordo, we're going to make 250 of Corona Gorda or Corona, right? Because there's not a large market for it. We all like to smoke it. So we're like, hell yeah, we got a cool size that no one smokes. Yep. And that's just part of it. So you always have to do Robusto Toro Gordo. And then you have the people that ask, oh, like, I got a good palate. Like, you gonna send me some samples? Or like people ask, like, do you like get, like, do you get feedback on the cigar from consumers? And we're like, no, like my father and our vice president, Ralph, have been doing this for, my father for 25 years and Ralph's been doing it for over 30 years. Like I consider them the experts, and not a consumer that, God knows what they smoke, even though all the cigars are really good. But like, we don't want to leave big business decisions to a consumer.
I actually really like that mentality. I think that's a great mentality. Like, leave it to the experts, because I think there's a lot of people in the cigar industry that read books and spend a lot of time at lounges that are self-appointed experts. Yeah. And, but they've never operated in the business. And those two dynamics are, they're completely different. Like, it's a completely different spectrum of understanding and knowledge and experience. I mean, 25 years of experience versus the guy who's read a few books and has hung out in the lounge, thinks that they know everything. I got all the answers. You know what I mean? Like, the one thing that I'm always humbled by is that when it comes to cigars, I learn something every single day. And with that understanding, I will continue to learn something every single day, which does not make me an expert. It just makes me someone who likes to consume knowledge and likes to understand, but I'm not an expert. There are experts, and there's people who've been doing this in the business side of it for a very long time. I just like to know things. Like, I like to be the Joe Rogan of cigars. I don't know it. I can't build a Tesla, but I could certainly understand the impact they've had on everything. Like, that's where I like to be. And I agree, to kind of leave it in the hands of the consumer is a tough thing. I actually really like that take, because I think most people would give an opposite answer, but I actually like that take more.
There's
I mean, something that is kind of a mix, like, of both, but I find kind of more to be a marketing tactic, is like, you go do an event at a shop, and the person that may be like the face of the company, they have their own personal stash of cigars that they have with them. And they're like, oh, you bought however many cigars here. Let me give you something out of my own, my own personal stash. And that cigar is probably eventually going to come out. And are they taking feedback? Sure. Like, I'm sure that people will light it up and tell them, hey, I like it, or I don't like it, or whatever. That cigar is probably going to come out, but they feel special that they just got an unreleased cigar. How cool is that? Oh, by the way, it's looking like it's going to be an August release. So kind of keep an eye out from brand X, for when this cigar kind of debuts. And now they're all hyped. They have a cigar that is unreleased. They see that brand X comes out with it and they're like, oh man, I got to go get that cigar. So are some people taking feedback? Yes. Do I think that they're all taking feedback? Not necessarily. But there are some people that do it, and they do it in a pretty cool way. Like I think Southern Draw just did a cigar where they had people give feedback and they let consumers choose what the cigar is going to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do think in some sense, like, it's feedback is good just from the value of like awareness. But I also think that, like, for some of those cigars that get passed out unbanded and they're conceptual and they are pre-releases, get handed to someone to smoke with the intentionality that bad boy's coming out anyway, regardless of your feedback. It's hitting the fucking shelves. Like it's coming out regardless. Like, you aren't going to be the one to make the final decision, but maybe just say, hey, I'm interested in your thoughts. You know what I mean? And those thoughts, that's the subjectivity of smoke. Like that's it. I mean, like, one person loves one thing. And I mean, I've had so many people, and it's like kind of a mind blowing thing. And I've created this correlation to like people's, and I'm not going to get into politics, but political beliefs. Like, there's a lot of tribalism in those things. And I think categorically just with the way that you smoke cigars and just what you get pure pleasure out of is going to differ from another person. Like, I like things that are more like, I like stuff that's like bold and it's got an element of sweetness to it. And I also like an offset of bitterness. Like, there's certain profiles of cigars I love. And I've had other people go, you're fucking insane. That's the worst cigar I've ever had. And I'm like, well, if it's the worst cigar that's ever, they're like, it's the worst cigar that's ever existed. I'm like, well, so-and-so is selling the fuck out of them. So they got to be doing something right. Someone's smoking these things, right? Yeah. And there's the inverse of that too. There's cigars where I look at other people and I go, how do you smoke that? And they're like, I fucking love this cigar. I smoke it every single day. And then I have to put myself back in the mindset, like, dude, Ed, there's something out there for everybody. Just there's a uniqueness to the way that we internalize what a cigar is supposed to be.
Do you think, do you think Fuente's got like, they do like consumer testing at some lab and they've got a diverse group of like consumers? It's like,
they handcuff them and just put cigars in their mouth and force them to smoke it.
And they're just like looking at them through like two-way glass. And they're like, well, based on our previous test samples, only 23% of American Asians actually preferred this flavor over the other one. And like,
like they're doing study groups. There's a lady in the corner just writing notes.
I would love if a brand was doing that. That'd be great.
But could you imagine if someone, again, was taking consumer input on a cigar and like they didn't come out with that cigar? Like, could you imagine if LFD or like, basically, let's say anyone that's ever hit number one, like someone smoked the Andalusian Bull and was like, this is awful. And Lido changes the cigar and doesn't.
Could you imagine?
Like, that'd be crazy.
Like, it doesn't come out to be that cigar. Like, there's no, Opus becomes a failure because some person said this fucking sucks.
Dude, it changes the world completely.
Yeah.
Like there is like, we could not even exist if those things occurred. That could change the landscape. It's the butterfly effect of the world as we know it. That would be really fucked up.
Maybes were made because Opus was created. And
exactly.
Like, half the population doesn't exist anymore because Opus was a failure.
That would be so. I could not imagine that. Like you said, like if Lido was just like, cut it, guys. Not on the table anymore. We got to divert. Let's go with this other thing. That would be so fucking wild.
Oh, man.
I'm sweating. Dude, this has been such a fun conversation.
What a great segment you guys could possibly do. What happened if the cigar never existed?
Oh, dude, that's a great segment. Holy shit. Chris is a great storyteller, too. He could definitely articulate something very well as far as like End of the Earth or like going back to like the Jurassic era. Like, this cigar never existed. Here's all the things that previously happened.
where did this cigar manufacturer end up because the cigar wasn't created and their business just tanked?
Oh, I love it.
Oh, that would be wild. Oh yeah, the conceptuals around that would be so fun to talk about. People would be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" We're like, we don't even know anymore. This is the lane we've created. You're either gonna listen or you're not gonna listen. Bradley, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. It was really good talking to you at the lounge as well. I was hoping that I wasn't going to duplicate questions I had already asked you there, and I think I didn't. So I think I'm going to leave it with this. One, I've got to say this because we hadn't talked about the cigar, the Kintsugi, and it made number 25. I fucking love that cigar so much. I smoke it all the time. It is absolutely, and I've had other people actually just DM, like they'll private message me and go, dude, the Kintsugi is the best Alec Bradley. Like I consistently keep getting it. And I'm like, dude, like, okay, so I'm not crazy. Like it is fucking fantastic. So congratulations on inching into the top 25. That's amazing. Do you have anything? So like if people want to get a hold of Alec Bradley, where to follow you on social media, website, do you have any events coming up? Like where are you guys going to be next? That whole thing.
So Instagram, Alec Bradley Cigar, Facebook, Alec Bradley Cigar, Twitter, I think is just Alec Bradley. You can follow us there and find out about like new releases and just whatever we're pushing at the moment. Also, I am on the other side of things, which I try not to tell people, but if you guys have any questions about our cigars, if you message, I will be there answering. And then events, we have the Great Smoke coming up in February. Down at Smoke Inn in West Palm. We have a pre-event to that on Thursday. Me and Alec will be at the West Palm location. Trying to think if I'm going anywhere else. I don't think so at the moment, but yeah, again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us and I'll answer any questions you got, literally any questions you got. So it could be about my personal life, about anything. Certain questions are off limit, but you guys know.
No, here's I'm gonna put this out to the audience. Ask him all the questions about how to groom a mustache.
There's no trick to that. That's just all natural.
It is all, yeah, I know. That's the thing. Like, I've had so many people say, dude, grow your mustache. You grow a thick mustache. And finally I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it again. Fuck it. And then I did it. Now I'm slowly transitioning to a cowboy. That's what I keep saying. Because I'm like so deep into Yellowstone. I'm like, I'll be a cowboy here in the next 6 months for sure. Minus the horses, minus the ranch, minus all the cool shit, minus the lasso. I'm just gonna be walking around like a cow. Yeah, like I'm just gonna
leave Ohio. When you leave Ohio, that's a possibility in your future.
My wife's trying that right now. She's very much. She sent me like 7 houses to look at, like southern states, and she's like, "We should go here." Look, she's like, "This one has a horse barn." I'm like, "Dude, I'm allergic to horses. What the fuck am I gonna do? Like, what am I gonna do with a horse?" Anyway. Thanks for coming on, Bradley. Absolute pleasure. Hopefully we get a chance to see you. I don't know when you're going to be back in Ohio, but when you are, make sure you hit us up. We're happy to come meet you again. And again, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me.
You got it. See you, fellas.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.